and welcome to the Adaptation Fund side event. My name is Daud Njai. I am a senior climate change specialist with the Adaptation Fund. We are very happy today to hold this event that is, for the first time, it's going to be a thematic event. Usually we have an Adaptation Fund event showing what we are doing or focusing on direct access. This is the first one where we will discuss an adaptation measures. And here the topic today will be family and community agriculture, developing and implementing sustainable climate resilient agricultural solutions. So we have a number of participants today that will give you an idea of the Adaptation Fund portfolio, and also the perspective from the civil society will be provided, and from beneficiary countries as well. So I will start with the chair of the Adaptation Fund board, Mr. Naresh Sharma, who will give the welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Good evening, colleagues. It is a special honor for the Adaptation Fund to host this side event as part of the important global activities of COP22 that have brought together so many countries and organizations to accelerate action on climate change. It is a pivotal moment for the fund as it soon embarked on its 10th anniversary with a strong foundation. It stands as the pioneer of direct access, which gives developing countries like Morocco and many others around the world the opportunity to access climate finance and development adaptation projects directly while building their own capacity to adapt to climate change. We now have 43 accredited entities that are able to implement projects across the globe. 25 of those are national implementing entities under the direct access. This includes Armenia, which just last week became the first country in Eastern Europe with direct access when its national implementing entity was accredited. About 40% of these entities are LDC and small island developing states. The fund remains in high demand. For the second straight year, it received project proposal with a record amount of requesting funding. Last year, the Adaptation Fund was also included in decision accompanying the Paris Agreement, stating that it may serve the agreement subject to a process that has already underway. This process has continued during COP22 with two more positive steps taken. The Conference of the Parties moved the process forward, and the ad hoc working group on the Paris Agreement agreed to embark on the necessary preparatory work to advance it further. Our concrete, localized, effective projects to help the most vulnerable communities in developing countries adapt to climate change are the hallmark of the fund. Many have components that cut across our theme today, which we are discussing now: developing and implementing sustainable climate resilience agriculture solution for family and community agriculture. So we are privileged to have a full agenda of excellent speaker who will speak about Adaptation Fund agriculture projects producing tangible results for families and communities that are going to be addressed to the poor and vulnerable people. So please enjoy the presentations and stay for the open discussions and question and answer period that will follow. Having said with this, now I complete my welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So now we have, so for the first time, we are receiving a guest here. We have with us Mrs. Marcia Levaggi, who served as the manager of the Adaptation Fund Board Secretariat from 2009 to just last month. Marcia Levaggi is now the Director General of Environmental Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for her home country in Argentina. She helped build and grow the fund, country-driven direct access modality, and policy foundations. So now, Marcia, you have the floor.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It feels strange to be a guest at these events, but I guess this is what I am now. Although I feel very much surrounded by a family, so it still feels very good. I'm going to give you some brief remarks on the topic of this side event, which relates to the operations of the Adaptation Fund, direct taxes, and with a focus on agriculture and family agriculture, a topic that is very much at the core of this COP. You all know that the Adaptation Fund was born in this same city, in Marrakesh, where we are now at COP7 as part of the Marrakesh Accords. And it was in Bali several years later when the Adaptation Fund Board, its governing body, was finally established. And 2 years or 1 year after that, the Secretariat of the Adaptation Fund was established. And we started operationalizing the Adaptation Fund together, board secretariat, with the invaluable support of civil society that pushed us to embrace forward-looking policies and sound operational policies and guidelines to make this fund robust and swift, operational, and to deliver in the adaptation field, which is one of the most important issues for developing countries. This fund embraces a country-driven approach, and this is materialized through the direct access modality, which this fund pioneered. When we started implementing the direct access modality, we didn't have anything to look at. We barely had some examples in the health sector, the Global Fund and Gavi, the Global Alliance for Immunization and Vaccines. And there were no examples around in climate finance. So the board decided to set up, to approve rules on how the implementing entities for the Adaptation Fund would be accredited, what they have to demonstrate in order to be accredited, starting with the fiduciary standards, and established an accreditation panel which started accrediting implementing entities. So we have, now the fund has 25 national implementing entities accredited, alongside a number of multilateral entities and also regional entities, which are delivering adaptation action on the field. And this has gone very well. It has been a vehicle for innovation, and also many NIEs have taken this accreditation experience as a way for building capacity in their institutions, to build in-house capacity that allow them to access climate finance, not only for the Adaptation Fund, but at a bigger scale. And l'Agence du Développement Agricole from Morocco, it's an example of this, and UCAR, the Unit for Rural Change in Argentina, is another example of this. These two entities have been also accredited by the Green Climate Fund, and ADA has already accessed funding from the Green Climate Fund, approved at its last meeting, I believe 30 million, if I'm not wrong. And the UCAR from Argentina has just been accredited, and we hope to also access funding through UCAR. So the direct taxes experience has been very rewarding for national entities, and also through their interaction with the Adaptation Fund, a very active and vibrant community of national implementing entities has been built. They gather every year in Washington, D.C. at the venue of the Secretariat to share lessons, to discuss the topics they themselves identify through surveys that the Secretariat circulates, and to share solutions for common challenges and interact among them, also through webinars. And this has also, through this interaction with the Adaptation Fund, some NIEs, like for instance, SAMBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, has been able to pioneer the first example of enhanced direct taxes through a project in the Northern Cape in South Africa. So the NIEs have seen that their potential is much larger than just working with the Adaptation Fund, but the Adaptation Fund has been the starting point for this. And in this, agriculture has, of course, been a key sector. One of the largest shares of Adaptation Fund projects are in the sector. And I have been deeply impressed by the work of ADA in Morocco. As I already said, I visited this project, their project, in September before leaving the Secretariat, and also by the work of the Centre de Suivi Écologique of Senegal that I visited 2 years ago. And these two projects are improving the resilience of their agricultural system in the face of climate change. And in my own country, Argentina, also the Adaptation Fund project is dealing with livestock management. It's one of the first adaptation projects in Argentina, and it's quite close to be closed. We hope that next year we will do that. The Adaptation Fund went through an evaluation, and the evaluation of institutional arrangements and its processes and procedures, and the evaluation found the fund relevant, effective, efficient, good value for money, and a learning institution that provides new models. However, the sustainability of the fund is a constant threat. This is one of the topics that are under discussion at the CMP, the meeting of the parties of the Kyoto Protocol, but also under the APA, the ad hoc working group of the Paris Agreement. We have another topic related to the Adaptation Fund, which is whether the Adaptation Fund will serve the Paris Agreement finally as acknowledged in Decision 1CP21. So the parties in Marrakesh are navigating this roadmap to make of the Adaptation Fund one of the funds serving the Paris Agreement. We believe this is very important because in my country, we believe the Adaptation Fund is already serving the Paris Agreement. It's providing funding for adaptation, closing the adaptation gap. It's providing capacity building, in particular capacity building for accessing climate finance to national institutions, enhancing national systems, and it's also a possible vehicle for the share of proceeds of the mechanisms under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So we see no reason why the Adaptation Fund should not serve the Paris Agreement. So we hope that since Marrakesh was the cradle of the Adaptation Fund, it also pushes the Adaptation Fund further in navigating this roadmap towards serving the Paris Agreement. So I think I will stop here and I turn to Miko. Now, thank you.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. In this brief presentation, I'm going to share what the Adaptation Fund is, because I know that there are several of you who might not be very familiar with the Adaptation Fund, and then go over some of the recent developments with the fund, and finally touch upon the fund, how it plays a role in the larger finance landscape. To start with the brief background of the Adaptation Fund, it's set up under the Kyoto Protocol. Its goal is to increase resilience through financing concrete adaptation projects. It's governed by a board that consists majority of developing country representatives, which is quite unique. It was set up to be financed by an international levy of the Clean Development Mechanism shares of proceeds and other sources of funding. And it's, like Marcia already mentioned, it is the fund that for the first time in the climate finance architecture provided direct access. The fund has raised about $500 million during its existence. About 200 million of these come from these certified emission reductions from the Clean Development Mechanism, and $350 million from contributions from developed countries. The fund has so far allocated about $350 million in 63 countries, of which 23 are least developed countries and 14 are small island developing states. The fund funds 55 concrete localized adaptation and resilience projects in 48 countries, and these projects reach about 3.7 million direct beneficiaries. Here is a map of the projects. The orange ones are the concrete projects, and the blue ones are readiness related projects that the fund is financing. Still, a majority of the projects are financed by multilateral implementing entities, but a growing part, 18 so far, are implemented by national implementing entities. As I mentioned, the original idea with the Adaptation Fund was that it would be financed mostly by this international levy. The carbon price crashed in 2011, 2012, and since that, the fund has relied on contributions from developed countries mostly. The board of the fund has set up fundraising targets annually or for 2 years. And for the current year, the target is $80 million. Unfortunately, until now, during this year, we still haven't received contributions, but we are hopeful that by the end of the year, this will change, or even by the end of the COP. The fund is in high demand. The active pipeline of projects is currently about $230 million worth of projects. I believe around 45 projects are under development for financing. In terms of the implementing entities, as Marcia as the chair of the board mentioned, just last week, the latest national implementing entity was accredited in Armenia. And now we have 25 national implementing entities, 6 regional implementing entities, and 12 multilateral entities. Now I will turn to the recent developments in the fund. The fund has been receiving positive feedback from the first phase of the overall evaluation of it being an adaptive organization, and the fund is constantly learning and adapting to its to the needs of the countries, and providing new ways of support. One of these changes is approving something called the streamlined accreditation process. It was discovered that in some countries, especially smaller countries, it was difficult to find suitable national implementing entity candidates that would be able to access the amount of funding that the fund is by default offering to each country. That's $10 million. So the board approved a streamlined mechanism which upholds those same criteria but makes the process of showing compliance with the criteria more flexible. And as of now, 3 entities have been accredited using this streamlined process. It saves time and effort, the investment that it takes to get accredited. The fund has improved its policies, strengthened its policies on environmental and social risk management, and most recently during this year, the fund board approved a new gender policy that will make the addressing of gender issues more comprehensive in the fund's operations. It has turned out to be clear that countries need not only the funds to support them in adaptation, but also readiness support to help them access these funds. And in 2014, the fund launched a readiness program that is providing support, including through South-South cooperation to countries to access funds from the Adaptation Fund. There's also a website which is not very clearly visible on the slide. It's called climatefinanceready.org, which is a place where all the readiness-related information is placed. A new development since last year is the pilot program for regional activities, which now expands the scope of operations of the fund from single country projects to regional projects. This is a pilot that was launched last year with a tentative amount of funding set aside of $30 million. Now it has turned out to be hugely successful, hugely popular. We have received funding proposals for about $100 million. So it's clearly oversubscribed. And the board decided just last month that the call for proposals for this new project type for regional projects will be extended beyond the pilot. So it is quite likely that it becomes a more standard part of the Adaptation Fund's operations. So far, 11 project ideas for regional projects have been endorsed. Finally, very shortly about the fund and its place in the larger adaptation finance landscape. Marcia already mentioned the evaluation that was very positive. This was the first phase that looked at the operational aspects of the fund and the structure of the fund. The fund was found to be relevant, effective, and efficient. In a couple of months' time, we are launching the second phase of the evaluation, which will look into the projects and programs that the fund is financing. The one issue that the board started discussing already 2 years ago is the relationship between the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund. As Marcia mentioned already, some of the national and implementing entities have been able to build on their experience from the Adaptation Fund and to access funds from the Green Climate Fund. In addition to that, the board has considered different ways of operational linkages with the Green Climate Fund, though it has not come to the final conclusion on how to do it, whether through which kind of linkage arrangement. But the secretariats of the two funds work closely together on a weekly basis, at least, on areas such as readiness support, results-based management, accreditation, and project and program identification. The chair and vice chair of the Adaptation Fund board carry out consultations with the co-chairs of the Green Climate Fund board in order to discover new ways of finding complementarities between the two funds. And this is something that Marcia mentioned already. This is the final slide. We are currently in the situation where the ad hoc working group for Paris Agreement, the APA, is currently considering ways in which the Adaptation Fund may serve the Paris Agreement, and that that outcome, the outcome of that discussion is expected to go to the CMA. Originally, it was planned to go to in this first session, which is during these 2 weeks, but now because of the early entry into force of the Paris Agreement, that may take some more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko. Thank you, Mikko. I would like to thank Mikko, Marcia, and Naresh for these introductory remarks. Now I would like to invite my four participants of the panel to come to the podium. So thank you. So like we said in the introduction, the focus on family, community, and sustainable agriculture for this thematic side event is because of the importance of that topic, and also the fact that within the Adaptation Fund portfolio of projects, we have a number of projects dealing with that aspect, looking at different types of subsectors, different types of ecosystems, different types of country circumstances. And we are very happy to have here Mr. Walter Oyhantcabal, who is the director of the Climate Change Unit in Uruguay's Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries. And the ministry is the executing entity of the Adaptation Fund project that is implemented in Uruguay. And the objective of that project is to build resilience to climate change among the vulnerable small family cattle producers. And the implementing entity for that project is ANI, the implementing entity for Uruguay. We also have Mrs. Meryem Andaloussi, who is the head of the Environment Service at the Agency for Agricultural Development, ADA, which is the implementing entity for Morocco. She will speak about an innovative adaptation fund project in the dry oasis region of southern Morocco, project that is helping local farmers to improve their water management capacity while diversifying livelihoods. I'm also happy to have Mr. Emmanuel Seck, who is program manager of ENDA Energy. ENDA Energy is a member of the Adaptation Fund NGO network. And Emmanuel will present on the important role of civil society in raising awareness and enhancing the value of Adaptation Fund projects, with a focus on the agricultural components of one of the projects that was implemented in Senegal. And last but not least, do I need to introduce him? Mr. Pradeep Kurukulasuriya. He's the head of the climate change adaptation for UNDP, which is a multilateral entity for the fund. And he will speak about a number of Adaptation Fund resource projects that are helping small farmers enhance their resilience to climate change. So I will start with Walter, please.
Thank you very much. I brought a presentation. I don't know if we can. Okay, yes, thank you very much. It's not that one. is this one, I think. Yes. All right, great.
Some technical issues.
These things normally happen. Meanwhile, I would like to thank very much to the Adaptation Fund and to the team in front of the Adaptation Fund for inviting us to be here and sharing our experience, our project, and experience. Well, we would like also to congratulate the Adaptation Fund for his 15 years birthday. And it was COP7 in 2001, so it's 15 years. That is a really interesting number. And we wish the Adaptation Fund just possible the continuation of the Adaptation Fund in the new scenario of the Paris Agreement. Well, now we have solved the technical problem. So what I want to share with you is that we have a project. The name of this project is Building Resilience to Climate Change in Vulnerable Smallholders. And this project received a grant of almost $10 million with a time frame of 5 years. Started in October 2012 with a national implementation agency and the Ministry of Agriculture as the execution agency. Let me share now some general features of the project and then some of the preliminary lessons that we are learning from the implementation. Uruguay is in South America, as you know, and is a country that is inserted in one of the most important temperate grassland biomes worldwide, what we call the Pampas or the Campos in this biome in South America. And due to these natural conditions, we are a livestock country and also cropland, and our economy is strongly based on the agricultural sector. And this is also a source of concerns for us in relation to climate change, because our economy very much depends on agriculture, and agriculture is done in the open air and is totally climate dependent. So whatever happens to the climate is extremely relevant to the sector. And we have seen that frequency of intense and generalized drought has had a particular intensity in the last decade, as you can see from those pictures of in which almost half of the 12 years we are presenting had severe stress for vegetation. And they derive in high damages and losses. For example, in 2008, 2009, the drought produced direct losses to farmers that we estimate in more than $300 million. But when we consider all the value chain, these losses at primary level achieve also $1 billion in total of losses. Uruguay has about 40,000 farmers, and 62%, almost 2/3 of them, are smallholders. And cattle and sheep farmers are almost 2/3 of all farmers. So this indicates how relevant the participation of smallholders in the total amount of farmers is in my country. What are the distinctive characteristics of this project? In principle, the first is that we target a specific vulnerable small family cattle farmers, mostly situated on very shallow soils that enter into a situation of hydric stress very easily, and this affects heavily the production and the income of these farms. We adopted also a territorial approach looking at landscape units instead of looking only at farms, but we look at farms inserted into a more general landscape where there are sources for building resilience. For example, services, organizations, information, local governments, departmental governments, and many other activities and infrastructure around the farm that also contribute to the resilience. And the methodology was a participatory diagnosis and a strategic planning elaborated in consultation with the beneficiaries. This is the territorial setting. As you see, is a significant portion of the country that is included in the project. And the project has three main components. The first one addresses how to build resilience at farm level. And for this, we are working with a target of 700 smallholders in the north of the country, of which 25% are expected to be women, and more than 600 smallholders in the southeast of the country, in order to increase productivity and incomes of the farms and decrease their variability due to climate change, or in other words, decrease the sensitivity to climate variability and increase the resilience of the system. The focus is mostly at farm level on forage management, increasing water holding capacity, and shadow solutions. The focus is also on associative projects, as the hypothesis is that farmers working in groups can access better information, can make better decisions, and can be part of associative learning process. And then finally, technical assistance and the strengthening of networks. The second component is oriented to develop and strengthen the local networks of which farmers are part. We are building a learning platform for the farmers. We are working with children, youth, women on adaptation to climate change and natural resources conservation. We are promoting the use of better meteorological information, including early warning systems and decision support systems. The third component is knowledge management, and we are very happy that the Adaptation Fund required us to specifically design a knowledge management component. Normally, projects don't have a knowledge management component. And in this case, in the case of adaptation, this is particularly important because there is no experience nor tradition in Uruguay on working on adaptation. And I think that this is also a similar problem in the world. So it is very important to specifically think that one needs to gather data, one needs to systematize data and transform this data into information, and then reflect on the information, validate information, and above the information, build knowledge. But for that, we need to measure and validate good practices, deliver catalogs of good practice that can be a vehicle for this knowledge that we want to deploy. Another key aspect of the project is having formal agreements to implement the monitoring process and studies with the academy. And there you can see we are working with the South American Resilience Center of SARAS. We are working with the University of the Republic, in particular with the Faculty of Agronomy, the Faculty of Science, and also with INEA, which is the National Institute for Agricultural Research, and with the Instituto Plan Agropecuario, which is the extension agency for livestock sector in Uruguay. The conceptual framework now, when we add 1 + 2 + 3, the three components, is that we think that in adaptation we have to play a kind of win-win game. We're looking for more productivity and more stable productivity, more adaptation to climate variability at the same time. This is, we do not look only at how to increase yields or how to increase productivity in terms of beef, but how to make this with less sensitivity and with more resilience. And we want to do it increasing production without increasing significantly the cost of production. Technologies that are costly or that require investment or that require credit are not easy to adopt by small or vulnerable farmers, because the family unit is in danger or threatened somehow. So many times farmers do not have access to technologies that are costly. And we think that there are a lot of opportunities in the case of Uruguay to increase productivity with technologies of low cost, based mainly on improving management, and this can have high impact. But these technologies are knowledge intensive. So we need technology transfer, and we need capacity building in order to incorporate them. And the other wing is related to restoring rangelands. In most cases, cattle farmers have overgrazed the grasslands for many decades due to the need to get the most of them. And this degradation has decreased the fertility, the organic matter in the soils. So we will work in order to also recover the lost fertility, increase and protect the biodiversity of the rangelands as a very significant sort of resilience. And we will sequester carbon. And this is a co-benefit, an adaptation co-benefit, because working with more grass, there will be more inputs to the soil and more raw matter to build organic matter fertility and sequester carbon in soils. We have a monitoring and evaluation strategy because, of course, we need to learn in order to upscale what we are doing with a certain group of farmers, but it's not enough to reach 700 or 800 farmers when we have several thousands. We need to learn from the process in order to be more effective and more efficient in the future. So we needed to design a control group. We then have to monitor what happened at the beneficiaries level. But in 1,000 or more than 1,000 beneficiaries, we cannot go into depth. So we designed a subset, a sample of farms, which we are now tracking in detail and where we are getting in-depth information. This is what we call reference farms, where we can draw more robust lessons on the impact of the approaches we are carrying with the farmers in terms of resilience, productivity, sustainability. Well, finally, to conclude, what are the preliminary lessons we think we are learning? First, and maybe very obvious, is that adaptation has to be integrated to development policies or to sustainable development policies. It's a part of the package. That it is very relevant to coordinate policies, science, and social actors on the ground. We cannot design good policies without the assistance of science and technology. And we cannot do it also without combining it with farmers organization, farmers' knowledge, which is very relevant. We are recognizing that resilience is multi-causal, and it's much more difficult to assess or to measure than, for example, mitigation. We can measure mitigations in tons of CO2 equivalent, but we don't have that simple unit in case of adaptation. So adaptation is a bigger challenge in terms of how to measure if we are really progressing. And we need to monitor, for example, the behavior of climate and meteorology in parallel to the monitor of what happens at farm level in order to see how do climate variability is affecting the farms compared to their past and compared to the control that we have in farms which are not being part of the project. So we expect to have a lot of lessons learned from the comparison of what happens in the situation after and before, and in the situation with and without. Other lesson is that technical change implies cultural and behavioral change, and this is difficult, and demand in this regard a facilitative environment and incentives. That adaptation is easier if it is based on win-win strategies. It's more attractive for farmers if adaptation is combined with increase in productivity, increase in income, and it makes it sustainable and independent of the initial support coming, for example, from the contribution of the Adaptation Fund. We want something that continues after the Adaptation Fund retires the support. And finally, information networks and organizations are key to build this environment that can benefit the deployment and increasing adoption of adaptation policies. And with this, I thank you very much. I expect not to have exceeded too much the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Walter. I really believe that this project is going to be an example, even at the global level, in terms of how it has integrated adaptation at the policy level, and the fact that the Ministry of Agriculture has integrated it in its strategy and is implementing it, and the monitoring and evaluation system that you have put in place. I think it will be really worthwhile showcasing it and replicating it in other countries. Thank you very much. I will ask now Meryem to present. And unfortunately, we know that all these topics are very important, but we are time limited. If you can stay within the 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dauda. So first of all, I would like to welcome you in the great city of Marrakesh, and I hope that you are spending a lovely time here. So also, I'm very delighted to join you in this side event to share with you the Moroccan experiences on direct access to climate change, mainly on implementing resilient agriculture projects. And I will be the woman panelist who meets the challenge to do the presentation in English. So I will do my best to do it. So in the first, let me introduce the Moroccan agriculture context and give you a brief idea on the role played by the Agriculture Development Agency, which is the national implementing entity of the Adaptation Fund on Morocco. The Moroccan agriculture sector, which contributes by 19% of national GDP, remains a vulnerable sector to climate change. Is also part more in the adaptation to climate change commitment than mitigation, and mainly through streamlining the use of water in irrigation. Given the importance of the agriculture on Morocco's socio-economic development, Morocco's Green Plan was launched in 2008 as an ambitious strategy with the goal to build the agriculture sector as a real lever for socio-economic development and resilience threatened to climate change. For this purpose, the Agriculture Development Agency, which is the public institutions within the Ministry of Agriculture and the Maritime Fisheries, is responsible to supervise the portfolio of the Green Morocco Plan. So besides the Green Morocco Plan projects that ADA supervised, our agency was able to mobilize more than $40 million from other donors. And the effort undertaken by our agency were rewarded by its accreditation by the Adaptation Fund on 19 November 2012, which allows the ADA to, as Moroccan NIE, to have a direct access to Adaptation Fund project. And on April 2014, the Adaptation Fund Board has approved the first project for total mountain of $10 million, which will be executed by the National Agency of Development of Oasis and Argentine Zone. The PACZO project or program aims to help and increase sustainable agriculture in Oasis area through 5 components. By improving adaptative capacity of water sector, improve the joint regulation of ground and the surface water through new sustainable hydraulic and protective structure management, groundwater build, protection structure of perimeters, and the restoration of Khatara and Segia, which are traditional irrigation system. The second component is about diversifying income sources and improving the living condition of population vulnerable to climate change in the target area. The third one is improving the ecosystem resilience in response to climate change and variability. And the other one is improving stakeholders' awareness through the management and exchange of knowledge. The project will directly benefits for around 40,000 people, members of the families of farmers and the residents in the vulnerable traditional oases. Women and the youth represent 50% of the beneficiaries. So for the component related to the livelihood of vulnerable population, the logic of the project is to develop a variety of resilient economic activities, small-scale ways, agriculture, tourism, new activities, and other ones. In this slide, I want just to highlight the importance and the big impact of the project by comparing the baseline scenario and the scenario with the Adaptation Fund projects. The project notably target the actions which have positive impacts on the most vulnerable population through promoting products, knowledge, and characteristic heritage on the oasis. By the second component, which allows on diversifying incomes for population, mainly for women and the youth people, the executing entity launched a call for projects or for proposal at the end of September 2015 to propose development project to be funded by the PACZO project. The call for projects concerned organizations working on the sustainable development in the target area, mainly proposed by women and youth beneficiaries. This call for project aims to diversify income sources and improve the living condition of vulnerable people to climate change in the target area. This is the process of the approval process of this call proposal. So 31 candidates were received, which total of 11 million dirhams. 12 projects were selected under this call for proposal in a different sector, in environment, in drinking water, agriculture, and the other one. So in the end of my presentation, I want just to congratulate the Adaptation Fund for the effort he continued to carry through its support for financing adaptation project to climate change in the most vulnerable countries. And also, let me take the opportunity to thank very much the Adaptation Fund team for their valuable support, their great patience, and their dedication, although they are small team, like I have already said. So thank you. The challenge is done.
Thank you, Meryem. Now I will give the floor to Emmanuel for the perspective of the civil society.
Okay, thank you very much, Dauda, and thank you for the Adaptation Fund Secretariat for the opportunities offered to the civil society to share their activities and also the case and initiative they follow within the countries. So what I will present here is achievement of the Senegalese project related to adaptation to coastal erosion, adaptation to coastal erosion in vulnerable area. It is related to the localities of Joal, where we had this rehabilitation of anti-silk dike for rice growing. So we all know the context within our countries with the variation in the rainfall quantity, the frequency, and the intensity of the extreme weather, the livelihoods, and also the fragile and sensitive ecosystem that we know in our countries. So to deal with these issues and cope with these issues, there is a need for some strong and effective strategies and adaptation plan. And when we have this adaptation plan, this need to be linked and to be operationalized by adaptation measure. And one of them is the project that the Senegal benefit from the Adaptation Fund. I think that it is one of the first countries who benefit from the Adaptation Funds. And to summarize the project, and for those who don't know the Senegal, and particularly the localities that benefit from this fund, you will see in the map somewhere Joal Fayut, where we will make this we focus this presentation. You will see also Mbour, and close to Mbour there is Sali, and close to Dakar you will see also Rufisque. It is where there are these three localities who benefit from the project. So the rehabilitation of the anti-silk dike was really a demand, a strong request from the woman. We know in this part of Senegal, so the rice cultivation is a tradition. So they have lost this tradition almost 1 decade because of the salinity of land, and you will see the testimony of one of the women who say that so the paddy yield is really affected by salinities. And then we organize several world development desertification world days. And during one of them, we have really a good audience at the national level. And when the project was submitted, this issue of rehabilitation of anti-salt dike was taken into account. So you could see before the rehabilitation, the remnants of the old anti-salt dike, because in 1956 or before, there was an anti-salt dike which was destroyed, and after that you will see the new one, the rehabilitated one, through the adaptation project. So then you will see upstream during the rainy season what people got when they with the water. It's look like a water basin, and I will show you a picture, a very interesting picture at the end of my presentations. So this is the upstream where we can have water for a long time after the rainy season, and the other side you will see where the women are growing rice. So the downstream, which is close to the mangrove, you see how the even if there is high salinity, you see that the land is recovered, and it is a grazing area. And I think that it is important to have all partners and all producers in this process. So after the reclamation of land and the restoration of the rice field, the women start growing rice, and you will see the representative, the former representative of the Adaptation Fund Secretariat, who visit the site and could see that now women are really growing rice. So we have more than 20 hectares of rice field that was reclaimed, and more than 1,500 hectares of arable land that was recovered. And I think that it is really important to strengthen and increase resilience and people food securities in this area of Joal Fadiout. So just to conclude, we think that there is a need to involve the research institute, because in Joal they have tried one species. I think it is they call it the WL70 or the WL5, but the production of this rice did not give a lot of production. So then now they work with the agricultural institution to see how they could increase the rice production, and even also the National Institute of Soil Pedology to see what could be the best species for the rice growing in this area. Beside the rice growing, we think that there is a need. If you look at, for example, the picture related to the upstream, there is a possibility for fish farming in this area, and also for market gardening. Downstream, there is a possibility for salt work in this area, and I think that this is contributing to create what we call the green job. So this is one of the main outcome of the project, particularly in Joal, and we have seen that after this project implemented in this locality of Joal, so it was extended in the part what we call the delta of Salum, because Joal belong to this delta of Salum, and they have a project submitted to the Green Climate Fund for the restoration of salinized land to increase the production, the production of rice in this area. So I think that this is a good example and also a catalyst for local development in our area of Joal Fadiout. So just the last one, I went there with my son, but I did not ask him what he was thinking or looking for. Maybe I suspect that he was looking for small fish, because there is a possibility for fish farming. or maybe that he was questioning the future. Just to say that related to this kind of project, there is a need to increase the awareness raising and also to educate the people when we build or when we had this kind of project, to make them sustainable and to have also a critical mass, because what we are looking is sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Now I would like to give the floor to Pradeep for the last presentation.
Marcia, I didn't get to talk to you before you left, but I just want to say on behalf of UNDP, thank you very much for everything you've done with this fund. We're just in awe in the way that you championed the cause of direct access and got this fund to where it is. So on behalf of all of us, congratulations on your new move, and we hope to continue to work with you in your new capacity. Also, thanks to the Secretariat for all the many emails that we have been bombarding you with of late in order to ensure that the projects that are under implementation continue to disruptions. It's not been easy given the size of the portfolio that we are currently overseeing. But just to set the stage, you know, we very much respect the principle behind the fund, and which is ultimately, I think, direct access. But there are a number of countries that simply have not been able to secure that access as yet. And as a result have turned to some of the multilateral entities in order to access the resources. We actually look at it as a way of direct access because our modality of execution is national execution. So all the execution is actually done by the ministries and NGOs within a country. UNDP does not get involved in execution unless, of course, there is a reason for it, especially with procurements and so on and so forth. But I want to talk about this project in Myanmar a little bit, and I'll give you a flavor of some of the lessons that are coming out of our project. This is Ong Mit, who is a farmer in Myanmar. He comes from a region called Nyang Yingon. It's in the Shwebo township, which essentially has been suffering a lot of drought related issues. The water you see isn't usually there. It's actually because of the investment from the Adaptation Fund. So it's a very water scarce region, which makes life quite difficult for people who live there. And the adaptation funds that the government was able to access with a little bit of support from us is basically going towards bringing water, diverting water from places where there is excess water and taking it to what the drier parts of the region so that livelihoods of the communities that rely on the land can continue to thrive. This is not uncommon. I mean, in places like Cambodia, in northern Cambodia, we've seen similar initiatives, and I think maybe some of you have visited it. But remarkable things happen when there are these kinds of inputs. The people form collectives. Sometimes they begin to trade water. They do all kinds of things that, frankly, we didn't even think about when these projects were designed. And it's fascinating to see, because in some cases, they're able to actually generate resources that then lend themselves towards ensuring sustainability of whatever it is that they started to do, including covering things like operation and maintenance of solar-powered water pumps and so on and so forth. This is Lamia Mohammed in the Maldives. She lives about 3 hours by boat from Male. If you ever been to that part of the world, it is quite isolated, but there are communities living on little pieces of land, and they do everything there. They grow their food, they use the water from generally groundwater. But what's happening in places like this, and you can see that's where the water level has been inside a house, but you can imagine the impact outside the house, because the salinity in the groundwater essentially makes it unusable. And as a result, what generally happens is the government, I was shocked when I saw it, they send little boats with water tanks sitting on it instead of people to these islands, so that they have the drinking water that they need, and so on and so forth. So the Adaptation Fund investment in the Maldives actually helped install integrated rainwater systems with solar panels and so on and so forth. And that's made life a lot easier. And in fact, in the case of the Maldives, that Adaptation Fund project was the nucleus of a bigger scaled up initiative that they submitted to the Green Climate Fund and secured resources to replicate this across 50 of the islands. So the impact that you guys are having with these funds is really, really fascinating. So UNDP, I mean, we are supporting a number of countries around the world to make use of these adaptation funds. I think there are about 22 projects in 22 countries, about $130 million worth of activities are ongoing. And these resources are sitting beside, in some cases, least developed country fund resources, special climate change fund resources, bilateral resources from BMU, BMUB, or the Australian government, the Japanese government. So it becomes, the adaptation fund projects become, or the resources become part of a bigger package in some cases. And that expands the options that countries have, which of course makes us very happy. Some of the investments are going towards policy level work, changing policy frameworks, regulations, laws, legislation. Some of them, most of them actually are very much oriented towards livelihoods-based activities. Some obviously touch on ecosystem related resilience activities and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things that we obviously have found out through this is that empowerment becomes a very critical ingredient for success. You just have to provide a little bit of seed resources and awareness or capacity building or training or whatever it is, and then the spark of human ingenuity takes over. So it's not really necessary to think through a lot of things with a lot of micro details. You just have to figure out the right entry points and allow the rest to take its place. And it's that kind of initiative that has, sparked all kinds of interventions. Mauritius, there's a massive program with mangrove reforestation in Colombia. They're using rainwater harvesting and adapting the rice production, doing wetland restoration. And Colombia right now, in fact, is using that Adaptation Fund project to formulate an $80 million initiative that's going to go to the Green Climate Fund by the end of this year. So barrier removal becomes a key intervention as far as we're concerned with these adaptation fund resources. And here we're really talking about legal and institutional barriers that are preventing the kind of change that needs to happen, the ability to adopt technologies that otherwise are too expensive to take on board. So it's really helping with removing some of these key constraints to adaptation. In some of the initiatives that are being funded by the AF on early warning systems, what we are seeing is now those countries are thinking of ways in which to make their Met departments more independent from the reliance of domestic public funding. So in other words, they are thinking about ways of creating value with the data that's generated from the extra observation systems and whatnot, so that those things can be traded, that can be revenue generating, which then helps them with their sustainability. So it's not just about putting extra systems in place. And we see in countries like Uganda, even in places like you wouldn't even think of, but they are making massive progress. Sierra Leone, Liberia, they are using this kind of approach to advance things in a different way. I wanted to sort of end with transformational change a little bit, because ultimately we are talking about helping countries and communities make those transitions from just coping with the risks that they face, from adapting to things that are coming or expected to come, and then ultimately to essentially change their state, where they transform into something which actually can withstand a lot of the range of impacts that we are likely to see. And for this to happen, you need incubators and incubators of ideas. And Adaptation Fund, I think, is a fantastic incubator of ideas that countries can then test things and then go to the bigger funds for scaled up financing. There's a lot of planning that is going on in these projects and with these resources. But ultimately, I think, as Walter also touched on, planning, while it's necessary, it's absolutely not sufficient. Ultimately, what we are talking about is incentivizing change. And if we want to see adaptation at scale, then we really need to start thinking about the kind of incentives that will change behavior to where it needs to go. So with that, just a few thoughts from the entire portfolio, which I hope gives some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep. This gives an idea of a quarter of the Adaptation Fund portfolio, or half of the Adaptation Fund portfolio, how it's been implemented. I don't know if we have time for questions, unfortunately. We are almost at 8 p.m. right now. We will just close and thank all of you for your presence at this time of the day. I know you are all very, very, very tired. Thank you for coming. And okay, Meryem,
Yeah, thank you.
would like to make an announcement.
Yeah.
On behalf of Morocco, the host.
On behalf of Morocco and on behalf of the Agriculture Development Agency, I would like to address my sincere thanks to my dear Marcia. We have been in touch since 2000, I think 40. But for me, like I have known her all my life. Sincerely, she is very nice, kind, helpful, humble, and always smiling. So we're gonna miss her longer, but we still bother you every time we need you or just to check for you. So wish you good luck for your new responsibility and on your wonderful country. And please join me on acclaiming her warmly. So thank you.
Emmanuel.
Yes, on behalf of the Adaptation Fund NGOs, we would like also to join ourselves in the thanks to Marcia for the huge work done in the Adaptation Fund Secretariat. Thanks.
Walter.
Marcia, I join myself and the ministry and the country because you have given us a lot of support. So thank you very much.
Anyone in the public who wants to thank Marcia? No? Okay. So thank you. Bye.